We're going to make this video shorter, and I'm going to tell you some stuff that I know about distillation. What is distillation? Distillation is when you separate two liquids because they have different boiling points. So you boil them, and then one boils out and one doesn't. One stays behind. That's how you make whiskey. This is a pot still. Two types of stills. Pot still, which does a very bad separation, but if you start with a really good product like barley or corn or rye, then you get those flavors left in the product, which is good. If you start with something really bad, like just plain sugar, then you want a better still, which is called a reflux still, which separates everything out and just leaves the alcohol. That's how you get vodka and gin. These are used for like bourbon and whiskey. This part's the column. It's made out of copper. Copper is good because it eats up sulfur. Copper eats up sulfur. This part here, this is a tube in a tube that cools the stuff down. You pump cold water around the steam so that it turns back into liquid. This is my first kettle that I would make beer with. It's now my boiler for my still. It's about 58 liters. You see the welding here? The welding is lead free. Don't use lead because then it makes you die, I think. Fine, next. You see this? Not for stilling, but I get comments all the time. Oh, so you still? There's a kind of still that looks exactly like it. It's called a worm. You could look one up, but this is for cooling beer down. It's called immersion chiller. This gets mounted in like this, and then the steam goes up, collects, comes down, collect your alcohol. Oh, can I just put this out here? Bourbon can be made anywhere in the US and not just in Kentucky, despite what you thought. I just want to put that out there. I'm having some American whiskey that I just made a year and a half ago because I could and also because I want to. It's actually still at cast strength, so that was much harsher than I would have wanted. Okay, issue with my setup. It's on that boiler's connected to the kettle, and then it's on the burner, and it can burn. Really cool thing I built was this. This is a pressure cooker, which is dirty and I meant to wash. But what you have here is a little valve with a hose. I fill this with water and I put it on the fire. Steam gets put into one of those extra little holes in this thing, and it goes into a piece of copper, which goes into the bottom of my kettle, and it shoots steam up from the bottom so that I can't possibly burn anything in my kettle. Super cool, and I'm super scarred about the time I burned 5 liters of delicious lacto-fermented rye, 100% rye. It was so good. The process of making whiskey is ferment it like a beer without hops. That's called a wash. Distill it once, ends up about 35% alcohol. That's called low wine. Let me show you low wines. Everything that comes out of a still is always clear. This is low wines from a grappa, which is grapes and sugar fermented. After low wines, you distill it a second time. At that point, you do what's called the cuts. Cuts means I put a little bit of, talk about safety for a second? No, I'll get back to safety. You put a little bit in the garbage, then it's called your four shots. Then your heads, which you don't use, then there's a good part called the hearts, and then the tails. It's coming out of the still, and you have to separate, make those cuts pretty much by taste alone. That's where it gets really cool, distilling. And then when you're done, that's called white dog. It's about 73%, and it's unaged whiskey. It's clear. You age it with oak. These are American new white oak cubes. These are not chips. They're cubes. The reason why I like cubes over chips, some people say the flavor's different, but what I like about them is that I can char them, different levels of char to make bourbon barrels, and I love bourbon. Whiskey. All whiskey in barrels is about 63%, from what I understand. Angel share. Angel share is whiskey goes down about 1 or 2% of alcohol that disappears from evaporation, called the angel share. Let's talk about safety for a second. Everyone thinks if you distill, you're going to go blind. Not true. You got to throw out the first couple of drips that come out because that's where the methanol is. That makes you sick or blind. But that's not really the danger. The danger is exploding. This this chamber gets sealed, and the liquids are coming out of it, or gases that are 90% alcohol. And there's a flame there, and it can get blocked up and turn into a bomb, and then you could die. So don't do anything that I'm saying unless you feel safe with that possibility. How do we seal the kegs? How do we seal them? Really cool. You mix flour and water, and you put it around the entrance of the lid, like where the lid meets the pot. Like, I don't know, whatever. Where the lid meets the pot, you put flour and water, and then that gets hot, so it gets hard, turns into a cracker, and it makes a perfect seal. It's a very hard to beat that seal. It's pretty awesome. A funny thing about stilling culture, it's hard to get good information on the internet. People are it's got a really interesting culture on the internet. it's a lot of rednecks. Oh, really nerdy fact, but it's really cool. Why do rednecks make whiskey? Like this. Can I say this fast enough? If you lived in the mountains and you were making corn and you needed to sell it in a port, you couldn't afford to bring the corn from the mountains to the port. So therefore, what did you do? You distilled it, you turned 15 bushels of corn into one little jug of whiskey, you brought the whiskey to the port, you could afford transportation. People that were not rednecks were living already on the ports, they were able to ship their stuff, so they didn't really care about it. So that's why in America, when they made the Whiskey Rebellion, because they were taxing whiskey, which was the most anticlimactic rebellion ever, people showed up and then they went home because they sobered up. The point was they were really upset because they felt they were targeting specifically people that lived in the mountains, specifically the rednecks. Nerdy, cool fact, gets me excited. Another surprising fact, Wild Turkey 101, tons of distillers drink it at home. That's a go-to cheap whiskey for distillers. Just a good fact to know next time you want to knock that. Let's talk about distilling culture. Distilling culture is fascinating. Distilling is illegal like everywhere. It's everywhere, except for Israel and New Zealand, I think. If you find out that it's actually illegal in Israel as well, please don't tell me. This is called a parrot. The way it works is the stuff drips out of that Liebig condenser and drips into here, goes down, up, and into this little column in here. I don't know if you can see it. And then it overflows. And the overflow comes out down this arm, and what happens is you put a Proof and Trolls hydrometer in here, which will tell you the alcohol level so you can measure what's coming out of your still. Some points on aging. Oak cubes, put in a lot of them, more wood than a barrel, it will go faster. 2, use oxygen. I happen to have an oxygen tank that helps me, or you could just shake it. But what that does is oxygen is the catalyst for the relationship between the esters and the oak. The sugars in the oak, it speeds it up. Do it. Dig it. I just finished recording, Rose. My microphone was on the floor the whole time. Classic. On the internet, people are super mean when it comes to distilling, mostly because it's illegal. I think they're uptight. There's books that recommend forums, and I saw one of the books that said, but just be careful because you can get hurt fast. People are really rude. It's really interesting. There's a way of talking on the forums that you say intelligent scientific things in a specifically dumb manner. It's really, so there's one big poster who always starts his post like this. These boys reckon. And he ends every post with, so I'm told, T-O-L-E. So these boys reckon, so I'm told. And it's one guy talking, there's no these boys reckon, but it's just how he types. These boys reckon, so I'm told. Awesome. Oh, and on the internet, it's called likker. L-I-K-K-E-R. We're all making liquor. So you think that you're all proud of yourself because you figured out there's no whiskey and liqueur? This is likker. L-I-K-K-E-R. It's a whole different thing, and it means, I think, everything distilled. Liquor. We're making liquor and hooch. I'm pretty sure that's all I have to say about distillation. A couple more days till opening hatch. I may or may not have my whiskey there. Probably won't for now, but I'd love to talk about it with you guys and then open a distillery for you guys because that would be a ton of fun. Maybe sour brewery, barrels, whiskey all together. I'm loving that. Share this, I don't know, do social media things to this to make other social media things happen to this. Viral this. And the toasty.